Good day, ladies and gentlemen. We are here for the Community Voices, a project of the Ministry of Sport and Community Development, as we seek to educate persons, share concepts, ideas of different issues. And we trust that it would not just only be informational, but it shall be transformational in our operations. Possibly we may even have some children with our midst, and so we welcome your participation to learn today and to be more informed. Today on our set, we have two guests with us. We have Professor Hutchinson, who is a technical consultant, and we have Ms. Mary Fullerton, founder of the Adhd. And you heard the letters there. No, I did not mix up my alphabet, but you will hear in a little while in terms of this particular situation. So let's start off with Professor Hutchinson, as you can give an appreciation of understanding dyslexia and ADHD.
So, good afternoon. ADHD is a condition that affects children primarily. It is what is described as a neurodevelopmental disorder, and the initials represent attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And as that name suggests, the condition is defined and characterized by children who are overactive and easily distracted. So this would be the hyperactivity, or the H in the definition. And the attention deficit aspect of it is children who find it very difficult to pay attention and concentrate consistently. There's a third component of the condition that refers to being very impulsive. So those three components, over or hyperactivity, inattention or the inability to pay attention and concentrate, and impulsivity, or the state where you do things without thinking about them or without considering the consequences, these constitute the clinical characteristics of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. The interesting thing about it is that although it's a disorder that is developmental and begins in childhood, it can continue into adulthood if not treated, and if the individual does not, as they grow older, grow out of it. So there's now another syndrome known as adult ADHD, where those same symptoms affect adults. The impact on children is that because of that inability to pay attention, they struggle with schoolwork, they struggle with following instructions, and therefore even in terms of playing games and interacting with their friends, they tend to have difficulty. So because of that struggle with schoolwork, it also means that their academic performance is not optimal, and that decline in academic performance sometimes represents itself with problems in reading as well, which would be called dyslexia. However, ADHD is not the only cause of dyslexia, although it may be a contributor. The major reason that children with ADHD come to the attention of either teachers or school officials or indeed clinicians is the behavioral aspect, which is the overactivity and the easily distracted part. So you find that they can't sit still, they're fidgeting, they're getting up out of their seats all the time, and because they're not paying attention, they're not able to follow their schoolwork. And because they're so easily distracted, they also distract their classmates, and therefore they can be a very disruptive influence on school. And when this occurs, they tend to come to the attention of the teacher and, of course, the principal and the school hierarchy.
So, Professor, you piqued my interest there when you mentioned even adults. Is it possible, probably through stress or genetics or so, that persons can develop that at an adult stage of their life?
Well, That's a very interesting question, a very interesting point, because it is now accepted or becoming accepted that, in fact, the condition that adults experience is slightly different to what is experienced by children. And in adults, the consistent thread is the inattention with what children experience. But in adults, the impulsivity is the one that tends to cause problems. And there are some experts who think that it's almost a separate condition, although related to the childhood version. So the simple answer to your question is yes, it can affect adults, but usually the adults who are affected would have had some signs of it growing up. So it would not affect an adult who did not have any signs as a child.
I guess the question might be to be able to detect these signs as opposed to just dismissing.
Precisely, and I think that is one of the issues that makes it difficult sometimes to diagnose it, because many studies have shown that the awareness and the knowledge of the condition is not as it should be for both teaching professionals as well as parents. So you find that when the child behaves in ways that are inappropriate or disruptive, they tend to be punished, or they tend to be described as hardened in our colloquial language.
Yeah.
And because of that, the perception is that they're just difficult and lazy and disobedient, because, as I mentioned, because they have difficulty following instructions. If they're given an instruction, they probably will not be able to discharge that instruction in the way that it was given. And of course, to a parent or to a teacher, that might seem to be disrespectful and disobedient. Yes. So the instinctive response tends to be punitive first, and it is only with testing and with clinical input one can realize that the child does have, in fact, a disorder and is not just being deliberately difficult or miserable or hardened, as I said.
Have you found in your studies and experience there may be genetic makeup or environmental conditions that exposes a child or so in terms of being developed?
Well, again, it is thought that there is some genetic component. It is not necessarily something that's inherited, but certainly there is a genetic component. Before it was called ADHD, in the 60s and 70s, it was called minimum brain damage or minimal brain damage. And it was thought that children who had difficult experiences while they were being born, so like prolonged labor or difficult deliveries or injuries perhaps in very early childhood, were predisposed to this condition. While those things remain factors, it is now clear that there are some people whose the way their brains are set up or wired predispose them to this condition. In terms of environment, if they grow up in chaotic environments where order is not a priority, where the stability of the home environment is compromised, then the risk of them developing it is greater. And of course, in today's world with the many distractions that are available to children and to adults, the ease with which people are distracted is now much greater. So if you will, the threshold for developing the disorder might be a little less now, because the presence of the smartphones and social media and all these things make distractibility more obviously expressed.
Yes, certainly. And in terms of environmental conditions?
Well, like I said, the home environment should ideally be ordered and structured, as should the school environment. It's also associated with parental drug use. It's associated with learning difficulties, and again, that it's difficult to say whether that's a cause or an effect. But those would be the kinds of environmental conditions that would predispose children to having that problem.
Okay. And is there consideration for spatial environment in terms of geography? Is there a tendency to see the more urbanized areas?
Well, definitely in more urban environments, again, perhaps because of the distractibility and because of the tendency for that lack of order and organization in the home to be greater, because the lack of supervision might be an issue, or you might have overcrowding, or you might have absence of, in an extended family, for example, an absence of the kind of hierarchical supervision that is needed in early childhood to, for a child to understand the social order. If they are disruptive, there might be no spatial mechanism to help them manage that, and therefore other children in the environment who might be inclined in that way might also be affected. So these would be the kinds of spatial issues that are likely to affect it. Another interesting dimension of it, two interesting dimensions as they apply to us, is pollution. So it's found that in environments where there's a lot of air pollution, which again would tend to be urban environments, the risk of this disorder is greater. And also the exposure to weedicides in food. So if you're exposed to a lot of weedicides in your diet, again, it's been found to be greater in those kinds of environments. And other things, diet, having a diet that's too high in sugar and too high in carbohydrates, all these are factors that are thought to influence its expression.
Got you. Thank you very much, Dr. Hutchinson. We have heard in terms of the contribution of our home situation and even in terms of our community. Hence the reason we ought to pay particular attention to our home environment and how we handle the situations at home, how we deal with the stresses and strains of life, and particularly as parents, the responsibility that we have concerning our children and even unborn children. But you would also consider the fact that there need to be support mechanisms and persons who can lend support if you have recognized that you are so challenged with this particular area. So I want to turn the attention now for a little while to Ms. Mary Fullerton, who is going to lend support concerning this foundation dealing with ADHD. And I trust that we'll be able to recognize that there is support if you may be challenged along this line. So good day, Ms. Fullerton.
Good evening, everyone.
So share with us your involvement in this particular area, please.
So in 2012-2013, I did not know anything about ADHD. My daughter had a son, and there was a lot of, let us say, upheaval in family life because I really did not treat her with the respect that you would give to a daughter with a newborn, her first baby. And so there was this family fight now. I don't believe in ADHD, you are making this up. And later on, when the child was about 7, there was a situation in school, and I went to the school to see the principal with her. And what I got from the principal is that we cannot do anything for him. He has good grades, yes, 20 out of in spelling, but we cannot keep him in the school. And this was a paid private school. And so I was shocked. And okay, you are supposed to know so many things, and how it is you don't know anything about that. And look at what you have done to your daughter. And I recognize in families how this thing can disrupt family life. And the abuse our children go through when they have ADHD symptoms. Now we say attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And I want to let us start changing the language. It is not a disorder. The children are very creative, and so we have to treat them with the respect that they have something to offer society. And the foundation was born first to create awareness for the public and parents, so that parents would be aware that the child is not bad and behaving, not carrying out the responsibilities in the house, etc., etc. That teachers would be more aware and find strategies to deal with the child in the classroom, and for public policy that we will try now to engage the children in a different way in the classroom, so that policymakers are going to find ways now to incorporate handling children with ADHD in a way that with respect, and the child will get a fair education as everyone else. So that was the vision of the ADHD Foundation at that time.
Right. So I'm hearing you for advocating the changing of the name ADHD to probably ADHD instead of disorder condition.
No, ADHD, it is not a disorder. Once we continue to use that word disorder, we have that stigma, something is wrong with that person. And that person is very creative. A lot of our creative people in society, I am sure, will have some symptom of ADHD. And we have people around the world, famous people who have made it, who run huge companies. We have Apple is one of them. And founders of companies. So we have to look at ADHD differently. Yeah.
You mentioned the example of the probably CEO of Apple, so to be corrected also. Mm-hmm. Do you feel that it is still taboo and persons who are successful still shy away from sharing their experience concerning the public perception?
In Trinidad and Tobago, yes, I can say that, because the people who are successful with ADHD symptoms, they do not, if you ask for help from them, they will not want to identify with it because of the stigma in society. And we have people in business, people as CEOs and so, who have, they have dealt with it. They import their medication, because you cannot get that here, all of it. We have one consultant. So they handle their situation differently to the normal person on the street, yeah.
That's interesting. So you have persons, probably in terms of that status quo, who are able to manage based on their economic framework and so on. But what about as the saying goes, the small man, the average community individual?
The average community individual, it is difficult. It is difficult first to have a diagnosis done. I believe is about $5,000 you start with. We do not have public spaces, or we may have public spaces, but you may take years, 2 and 3 years before you can get it done properly. Or it is not known. People are not aware of it. You have parents who cannot afford, they cannot even afford their normal monthly bills, to have that. Plus, after you have a diagnosis done, what does a parent do? If you are living in Arima, you're working in Port of Spain, your child is in Arima going to school, what support do you have in those areas? We talk about therapy. How can that child move from school, when we had school school premises, how can that child move from there to go to a therapist? So you have all these logistics, the traffic, the everything else. We do not have the sufficient support for persons with ADHD.
You mentioned that possibly from a societal standpoint. I want to even go, as you mentioned, the school, and where we see exposure, notwithstanding the pandemic challenge, the issue of diagnosing and even training teachers and even school social workers. Are you satisfied that sufficient effort or sufficient time is taken to bring the capacity of those persons to be able to not treat, but of course, but to identify persons so affected?
And I have to say what little I am aware of, those persons like social workers and people in the child guidance unit and so, they are overwhelmed. They are trying, but they do not have enough resources. Okay. And with teachers, from my experience, some teachers, because of our culture and so, they do not believe in it. And that was my experience at that school. The teacher told the principal, I don't believe in it, and I'm not going to do anything about it. And the principal said, well, Mrs. Fullerton, that is all we can offer right now. I cannot bring the child into the school because the teacher wouldn't teach child.
Wow, okay. So in terms of the foundation as a support entity, and so let's say persons who are so interested would want to hear more, want to become involved, to learn the area of support and so, what's the next step for them?
The support, it is sort of challenging because the ADHD Foundation does not have charitable status from the Ministry of Finance. And so we cannot raise funds to do the things that we will need to do. We need a space to operate from. We need to have a space for therapy, for diagnosing at a subsidized rate, things like that. Group, parent support, we have no space. So I am really, as a person, individual, and Professor Hutchinson, how can you do this without funding? Previously, we have had about 3 or 4 conferences for awareness where we brought in people, and it was funded personally. So how do you get through that challenge of funding? Because everything requires funding. If you're going to subsidize the diagnosis, you have to get funds for it, and it is very expensive. So it is not just the person, it's not just the professional, but what you need to do the diagnosis is expensive. So we are sort of stuck, but anybody who is interested can get in touch with us. It is on Facebook. We have a website, ADHD Foundation of Trinidad and Tobago. Facebook, ADHD Foundation of Trinidad and Tobago, and get in touch with us. We need a space to operate from. If anybody has a space that they can give us until we can be sustainable for a year and a half or something like that, we appreciate that. And that is as much as I can offer right now, Also, we do not have proper research, and that is an expensive thing to do because you cannot you cannot make a call and say, well, this is this, or we have so many people and this is what we need. So to inform a strategy as how to move forward, you must have research.
So if you were to summarize or make an appeal even to the wider audience who's paying attention now, in a few words, what would you say to them?
To the wider audience, I think first we really need to be acknowledged as an NGO that is operating in the best interest of society. And so we need the ministry's acknowledgement of that, which is through the NGO, the charitable status. The other thing for persons who are interested in helping, we need space, if you have space that you can give us. And also, people who would like to have community groups, support groups, we have been asking if you want to do that, we can help for you to set it up because people moving from one area to the next is difficult. Yeah. And if you have community support, you can have that in your area. We help you to do that. And short term, I think that can work.
Yes, thank you very much, Ms. Fullerton. I'll probably turn over to Professor Hutchinson at this time in terms of what message you want to leave with our audience today.
Well, I think the greatest issue is recognition, because it still is a very under-recognized disorder. As Ms. Fullerton says, the stigma associated with disorders or mental health problems is still great, particularly for children, and for parents and teachers to coalesce under that umbrella regarding providing support for our children and adolescents, and to work alongside the mental health professionals to provide a better range of services for our children, particularly those with ADHD.
Much appreciated. As we continue in this informative process, we have today on the set Mr. Brendon Brathwaite, who is going to share with us some information on the issue of dyslexia. What is dyslexia about? And probably in terms of some of the signs and symptoms, and of course, to be able to get support for this particular situation. Mr. Brathwaite, welcome to Saturday.
How are you going? Thank you for having me. Just exciting to be here.
Great, good to have you. Well, tell me something about yourself, Mr. Brathwaite. You are involved with the Dyslexia Association?
Yes, I am. Basically, my interest in dyslexia is natural because I am dyslexic. And essentially, I met the association many years ago when I was executing a event, and realized that it had an association for people like me, persons who at the end of the day needed help in reading, interpretation, and understanding numbers. Now, the thing is, I am an adult dyslexic, and in many instances, persons, even as young adults or kids, are unaware that they are. And it becomes a trying process to try and figure out if they are not, and because it's a learning disability. Yeah?
Great. So, forgive the expression, you look like a normal person.
And that's it. The thing is, dyslexia is not necessarily a physical disability, and it's not necessarily, I wouldn't even call it a mental disability. It's just a different wiring of the brain in which we are unable to naturally interpret numbers and words in the traditional way. So, for example, we may not be able to read an entire story without putting in some of our own words. We may have to, fill in the blanks in some instances because we just don't interpret it as easily as it comes to other persons. Now, we also have problems with numbers. Believe me, the words and numbers in the traditional academia affects dyslexic people. And that's generally it.
I got you. So tell me something more of the association. How long has been in existence? And
Well, the association has been operating since 1990. And one of the key things that they've done, they've behind the scenes been able to educate and teach teachers. So they teach teachers in how to manage, train, and educate dyslexic students. And the numbers, they've been able to do more than 1,000 teachers through the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago, from as far as Togo to Tobago to Matlo, everywhere. So I think that's what our mandate has been over the years, to generally being able to equip the people with the power to educate others and actually being able to, because it's a difficult task. When you have a student in your class that may not be struggling, you may not know what is the problem. You might think it's trouble home, you might think it's a lot of other things, when at the end of the day, it's just they can't interpret numbers and words easily.
Wow, okay. So in terms of being able to diagnose dyslexia?
Well, the diagnostics of this, diagnosing dyslexia is not an easy task. What is needed, again, and I would always tell people, reach out to our website. It's dyslexiatt.org, www.dyslexiatt.org, and check us out there, because it would have all the information on how you could probably even do a self-diagnostics. And then you would have to consider going to a professional. Now, in early stages, people might think that it's something to do with sight. Like you're not seeing properly, so you need glasses or that kind of thing. It might be some people, parents may think that their kid is just, he kind of not that bright and, he's struggling in school. When it might not even be that. it's not our inability to learn, it's our inability to interpret. So it's a difference. And again, some people will say that, traditionally you say, somebody in your school, nah man, he dance. I was one of those persons that people would say, yeah, he dance. I struggled, but at the end of the day, over the years, when I got diagnosed, for example, I was in Form 3.
Form 3?
Form 3, yeah.
Okay.
And before that, I didn't think I was going to amount to anything in life. I'm sorry, that was the ultimate. I just said, you know what? I can't navigate school. And only then, when I realized that, wait now, there's a disability I have, that's when I realized that it was my superpower. That's when I said, okay, well, I think differently and operate differently, and I use it to my advantage to not necessarily see myself as, okay, I can't cope. It's like, okay, now I know why. And I think that is what parents could do for their kids, as well as adult learners could say, you know what, the reason why I've been struggling all this time is because of this. So we urge people to get more information to see if this is something that affects them.
So help us out here. Standard 5, common entrance or SCA, depending on the time. Form 1, Form 2. What would have been that experience for you?
The thing is, you're unaware of your inability. I remember struggling to spell words like kitchen and beautiful, and I spell in kitchen with a C and all. Like, you would think that you're bad at spelling. There were instances, I remember, even when I was in Standard 2, I remember dictation was the worst subject ever. Everyone would be able to, the teacher would read out, and I can't put down one word in my book. And so it's different for every learner. It's different for every student who's dyslexic. But across the board, it's an inability to just be able to use words and numbers as easily as everyone else. And believe me, you could feel bullied. Then people could come and say, you know what, you can't spell, or you can't learn, or you're not doing well. And that tends to, of course, marginalize a lot of students' potential in the long run. You could feel that, you know what, I'm not good for school, and therefore maybe you might even gravitate to sport. And some people tiptoe that line where they say, you know what, I'm not good at academics, so let me concentrate on sport. And sport, in essence, gives them some confidence. But if they understand that is a disability that they have, they could say, you know what, I'm not good at academics because of my disability. And I'll focus on sport and still focus on academics. So now that it's almost like you have a justifiable reason to push forward. And that's what I did. That's what I used for me. Like, that motivated me.
So as you mentioned, that transition after your sense of diagnosis, but the time before, for your experience, you were bullied. Is it possible that other young people going through the situation, it would have been the flip side? They became the bully.
Oh, well, in essence, remember, with our learning disability and not being able to pinpoint it, remember, you don't look. You're a normal person. Persons may express themselves in many different ways. And it may come across negative, in some instances positive. Some people might even want to stay away from school. And so it really puts people, and that's why educating the teachers, because that's the first point of reference. And a teacher might be able to easily spot a student in their class and say, hey, that person is dyslexic. I could see the signs easily. And that's why our association, in training the teachers, give them that skill as well, to be able to early diagnostics of that student.
Great. So was it the case that the teachers reached out to the association or the school as a collective body? How was that done?
Well, how it works is that, because we're a NGO, we communicate in forums like these and tell teachers to reach out to us. We, in turn, provide an opportunity for training for them. It is, again, is something in which we have a lot of sponsors on board. And sponsors have helped our training throughout all these years. And they have been able to push our mandate, help us push our mandate even further.
Great.
Yeah? And so that's how we help out the teachers.
Great. So have you found, in terms of a particular need to focus in terms of some areas, for example, rural areas, or in terms of different class of persons and so on?
And that's a very, very good question. The thing is, dyslexia affects And if correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it affects 1 in 10 persons. The statistics might even be higher. But in affecting people like this, it's not a matter of class. It's not a matter of where you're located. And so I'll give you some examples. I think Einstein was considered dyslexic. Tom Cruise, Richard Branson, one of the largest entrepreneur in the world. We have, and that's why I keep on telling people that when you have dyslexia, it's really a superpower because you have now the opportunity to see the world in a different way. And that's how I've been using it to navigate my world. And so that's how I like to communicate it.
You have a superpower.
Of course. I mean, I'm not a superhero, but I think I have a superpower in the sense of, and I'll give you an example. When I basically became, after secondary school, I became a lecturer. Well, I was navigating myself through UE and all the other things. I became a lecturer in event planning. And as a lecturer in event planning for the Adhd Graduate School of Business.
Can I pause you there? You skirted through going through UE.
I'm sorry.
And so
I'm sorry.
For some people, that is indeed significant because they cannot really envisage their child or even so reaching that stage given situation.
And that's the next thing. And that's why diagnosing someone early is so important. Because at my stage, because I was now understanding my situation, I didn't see it as a limitation anymore. I embraced it. I was like, yo, I'm dyslexic. So at the end of the day, my success is if I get 70 in an exam and somebody get 90, I know in the back of my mind is like, I really get 90.
Right. Okay.
You know, okay. I was being marked more on my content and not the context. Right. So I might be able to spell all the words correctly in my essays, but at the end of the day, my essay made sense. And so that's why I keep on saying it's not our inability to learn. Is more inability to interpret. And sometimes our inability to express.
Right.
So, especially in writing and that kind of forum. So, yeah, again, now with new mediums on board, such as, let's say, audiobooks, just say autocorrect. You have all these different mediums like in Word and thing you could type in and they'll correct your spelling, auto spelling and that. These things help. Grammar correct, all these different things help with regards to easing the blow. But if you have to write a letter in a hurry, you may not have somebody to check it over for you. And so in navigating your adult life as someone with dyslexia, you always need a team of people around to say, hey, look this over for me. Please, if you could. Even communicating on social media, you can make errors. Right. And someone will be able to say, hey, check this out. I think you spelled that wrong. So we might be with persons who mix up there and there or here and here. And it's just because the words don't come naturally. They don't come naturally to us as other people would have.
Appreciate that.
Yeah?
So as we close, probably you can share some of the coping mechanisms that we'd want to have.
Well, in coping with this dyslexia, first of all, I think, they say the only way to recover from something is admitting. I think, first of all, people need to get diagnosed. We can't say that enough. So again, go to our website, dyslexiatt.org, and get some more information and see if we can reach out to us, and we'll reach out to you, of course. Yes. That's one. The second thing is everyone learns differently. And I think we have to appreciate that, because even if you're not dyslexic, meaning that, let's say you're not picking up on something, everyone learns differently. And we tend to have a need for people around us to understand us a little more and not necessarily bring us down to say, hey, that's a bad thing. At the end of the day, okay, you're learning differently, okay, hold your corner, but you know what, maybe I can help you a little more. Right. So coping is more along the team-oriented. As an adult, I need a team of people around me. So I need, every time I do something to put up on social media or communicate in a mass market or a proposal, I need to ensure that somebody else, even though the computer might look at it, I need somebody else to look at it before I send it out to anyone. Great. So that's the kind of coping. You have to cope with that kind of thing. And again, there's no cure for it. I need to make note of that. There's no tablet or there's no, again, it can help you cope. But there's no cure, automatic cure for dyslexia.
Got you. Much appreciated, Brendon Brathwaite. And so we've taken the time to bring the information for you. I trust that is indeed continuing to be informative, one, and trust that you'll be able to translate this information in terms of better living. And who knows, you might be able to help someone who probably didn't recognize of the challenges they face concerning dyslexia. And even for yourself, understanding the struggles that you went through at that particular point in time, who knows, this may have been a diagnosis. You are viewing TT Online Community Voices, a project of the Ministry of Sport and Community Development. Thanks for watching. Looking forward for you to join with us another time. Thank you.